address the Assembly.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
On behalf of God, the merciful Mr. President of the General Assembly, at the outset of my intervention, I would like to address on behalf of my delegation, my congratulations to Mr. Korosi for his election to the 77th session of the General Assembly. I wish him every success in his term. I also thank Mr. Abdullah Shahid for his tireless work and the invaluable contribution he made during his presidency of the previous session of the General Assembly. I also would like to applaud the continuing efforts of Mr. Antonio Guterres, who leads our organization with wisdom and balance in these difficult circumstances around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, my country, Libya, which I have the honor of serving and representing, is going through a decade of both suffering and hope. Libya is still trying to build its state institutions and consolidate the principles of democracy. The Libyan people have demonstrated to the entire world that they represent a unified a unified nation. In spite of the challenges, the Libyan people, thanks to its clairvoyance, tolerance, and forward to realize their aspirations to build our state and pave the way for stability and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, the events of today certainly recall the past. The Army of Libyan Liberation, which was created before the creation of the Libyan state, fought alongside the armies of the world, of the free world. After the defeat of fascism, Libya earned its independence. Our independence was born as a result of our national combat, and this made it possible for our founding fathers to build our country and to launch our trajectory of prosperity and development, which in a record time made Libya a model of development. Ladies and gentlemen, today, of course, the situation is very different. Individual interests of different countries involved in the Libyan situation, as well as proxy wars and diverging views on how to solve the situation in Libya, have not given us an opportunity to develop our own national path. The very negative international interventions offer contradictory solutions which push our country towards armed confrontation, which do not spare innocent people and which lead to intransigent political positions, which do not accept any concessions and any middle ground. Ladies and gentlemen, the Libyan Presidential Council is attached to its role as indicated in the Libyan political agreement. As the supreme political authority, this council represents national and international unity of the country and fulfills the function of the commander-in-chief of the army. It is also responsible for leading the efforts of national reconciliation that is inclusive to pave the way towards democratic and peaceful transition through parliamentary and presidential elections. At the same time, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the African Union for having cooperated with us in order to launch the project of national reconciliation. This project represents the most important pillar to support our trajectory that would lead to peace and stability they were hoping for. These responsibilities force us to work in the framework of an impartial and balanced national efforts. In spite of the attempts by certain political parties to push us towards political confrontation that we are trying to avoid by every possible means, we are trying to resolve these political disputes. The Presidential Council has closely followed the series of dialogues between the Parliament and the Council of State. These rounds of dialogue have still not led to an agreement on the constitutional rules to be followed for the parliamentary and presidential elections. The Presidential Council continues to stress that these rounds of dialogue should not continue indefinitely. The Presidential Council is ready to intervene to have the political process, if necessary, to overcome the impasse in the political process, if necessary. At the economic level, the Presidential Council has supported all efforts that have made it possible to restore the production of gas and oil in all Libyan regions. This certainly is in line with the national interests and supports stability on international markets that have been under severe pressure, especially in countries that are major consumers of energy. Furthermore, based on our balanced position, the Libyan Presidential Council is attached to a transparent and fair management of our oil revenue, which belongs to all Libyans. The goal is to have public funds not be a source of conflict, and for them to benefit all Libyans in every corner of the country without geographical, political, or other distinctions. If we manage to achieve this goal, it will reduce the current conflict for power and create a climate that is favorable for our democratic transition. Mr. President, my country considers the role of the United Nations in a positive light, in spite of the slower rate of that intervention recently. We still expect an active role of the United Nations through the new leadership of our UN mission in our country. We call on the continuation of the mission in favor of national inclusive reconciliation that will allow us to overcome the current impasse. This impasse has opened the way for individual initiatives that risk undermining all the political progress achieved thanks to the political dialogue under the auspices of the United Nations. I also call for a new momentum in our economic development. One of the three trajectories of the Berlin Conference, which was neglected as far as we're concerned, that is transparency and justice in management of oil resources, financial control and public expenditure, and combating against corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, the world today is on the threshold of a new international order, an order which reminds us of the suffering of humankind at the beginning of the 20th century. And while we thought that the errors of the past would never be repeated again, today, now, it's time for human conscience to speak out in favor of peace, and that the entire world supports the international principles enshrined in the United Nations to uphold the principle of sovereignty of states and to resolve conflicts by peaceful means and to respect good neighborly relations and not destabilize security of nations. I also call on the respect for the right of people to use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes in conformity with the criteria defined by the IAEA. Furthermore, my country is on the front lines of the combat against terrorism, and I call on a renewed unity in fighting terrorism. Terrorism still represents a threat to all countries of the world. This threat does not spare any race, any religion, any civilization. My country has fulfilled all its responsibilities at the international level to strike at the sources of financing of terrorism. And from this tribune, I would like to reiterate the commitment of my country to support the right of the Palestinian people to create their own state and to stop the settlements and attacks against it. And we call on upholding international resolutions on this point. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, this month, the Libyan people are observing a minute of silence during the Day of the Martyr, a day that coincides with the assassination of our national hero in the anti-colonial fight, Omar al-Mukhtar. The Libyan people are inspired by the combat of its ancestors to learn patience and to be more determined in defending its rights. The Libyan people draw inspiration from its founding fathers to become more tolerant. The current period will be enshrined in the national memory. Future generations will recognize the positions of those who supported us and those who undermined our security, who pillaged our richness, our wealth. Libya, due to its Arab neighborhood, due to its position in Africa, is a link between civilizations and as an economic hub where the interests of the world are concentrated. And the damage that we've experienced have not only affected the Libyan people, but have also affected